Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Hamish Mykura. I'm the head of documentaries at Channel 4, and this is a session about Keo Films, who, when I first began at Channel 4 about nearly 10 years ago, were known by some of the commissioning editors as the People's Republic of Keo, because they were regarded as a bunch of people who probably lived in a yurt somewhere in the West Country and would drive up to London occasionally in a battered Land Rover smelling vaguely of pigs, and turn up and have very ideological ideas about radical living and self-sustainability and so on. And where there was no discernible boss of the company, they all seemed to be on a kind of equal footing, and they might well have a dog outside tied up by a string.
With 3 legs.
With 3 legs, exactly. And now look at them. Keo Films 10 years on. This year, what a year for them. 2 BAFTAs, 1 RTS, 1 Broadcast Award. Actually, everyone in the audience is starting to hate you now. And sundry digital awards as well. With Hugh's Fish Fight and Welcome to Lagos being responsible for most of that catch. And they're a company who do a variety of different things. Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall is here with us, and River Cottage, and then subsequently the campaigns that he's done are probably the highest profile part of their output. But they also do a lot of adventure anthropology, you might call it, which I think has been really quite radical and transforming of the way that documentaries are made. And they also make documentaries about contemporary culture, perhaps a smaller part of their output overall, but again amazingly influential. And their film about Banksy, or their film by Banksy, featuring him, which I think is one of the films I've enjoyed most over the last 18 months. I've seen particularly of theatrical release films. That's something that we'll have a chance to talk about. So the session lasts for an hour with some time at the end in addition for questions, and we'll be showing you some clips too. So first of all, I suppose we can start with some clips which show the birth of the company and its earliest days. So here goes.
Bluebottle is a highly successful species. Its life cycle can be completed every 7 days, and each female fly can lay up to 2,000 eggs. This capacity for population explosion has convinced Bruce that his new factory may indeed be able to make a real impact on the growing problem of waste meat.
They lay thousands and thousands of eggs. This sheet alone will produce about 80, 90 gallons of maggots, which will then consume maybe 1.5 tons of feed. So you see, if I could grow enough flies, I could actually get rid of all the waste meat in Great Britain. They have great potential. So, you know, I have the greatest respect for flies.
Out here in the fields, I fight for my meals. I get my back into my living.
Fine, the tide is not quite in the turn yet, so we've got at least an hour before you have to panic. Okay, so...
I'll be all right if you give me a guddle.
What have I started? And nice.
It's wonderfully clear water.
It's beautiful clear water.
Here's one.
Ah, well done. And a good size.
1-0.
1-0.
I'm afraid I get very competitive about this.
As the great English summer hots up, my ewes are looking a little overdressed for the weather. Clearly they need a trim, and freelance Kiwi sheep shearer Braid is here to give me a lesson in the art of ovine topiary.
Are you sure you're up to it, Hugh?
I'm not sure at all, no.
Aren't you?
I've got to have a go, haven't I?
So tuck that leg in behind your knee.
What, literally right behind there?
Yeah, look at that.
I'm being worried that her head is about to disappear through my legs. There we go.
Come on, Hugh. You're buggering around like an old woman. It's not an old lady's rest home.
OK, come on, let's get on with it. Where should I start? That's so hard. It feels very coarse here, but I'm worried about cutting the skin.
Get a hold of a seat, will you?
Oh! How's she sitting for you, Hugh? She's sitting all right?
There we go. Come on, Hugh, get a grip. You're not giving in, are you, Hugh?
I don't want to give in, but I'd quite like you...
You don't want to give in, but you want me to do it. No, you've got to say, I give in. The sheep have beaten me before I'll carry on.
I'm really sorry, Joanna, but I think you'll be better off in this guy's hands, to be honest. I give in.
Okay, Hugh.
The sheep have beaten me. You can finish the job.
So, well, let me introduce, first of all, Will Anderson, Zam Baring, Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, and Andrew Palmer. And it was you two who really began the whole thing with that maggot farm scene that we saw there. So tell us a little bit about the maggot farm.
Well, Hugh came to me and asked to shoot a screen test with him, is where it all really started, wasn't it?
It actually, I think it started in a pub the first time I met Andrew, and he was playing pool. I hadn't spoken to him yet, but I had a bet that he was going to make a shot, and he didn't. But we became friends soon after that, and at the time Andrew did an anthropological filmmaking course at Manchester, and I was working as a cook and an occasional journalist. Andrew wanted to make films, and I wanted to do some telly, and we started talking about how we were going to kind of break in. And I was quite interested in presenting, and I came up with an idea for, as Andrew said, a sort of screen test, just a sort of silly half screen test, half pitch film. And I thought we should make a film about the gastronomy of fishing bait, because I did a bit of fishing, and I knew that freshwater fishermen, particularly carp fishermen, were very obsessed with bait and had all sorts of recipes and ideas. And I thought we could do it as a sort of spoof of a cooking show. But anyway, it led us into a few fishing tackle shops, and it led us to ask the question, which we'd never asked ourselves before: where do you get your maggots from? And so the guys the guy in one of these fishing shops gave us a card of a maggot farmer called Bruce Silcock. And I didn't know that maggot farms even existed, but we thought, well, it sounds interesting. So we went to see Bruce's maggot farm, and we felt we had found a character, and my screen test was put on hold, and we basically made a very short film about Bruce and his maggots, which we then started touting around. And I think we pretty much got to the very near the end of the list of people we could possibly send it to. But we sent it to QED, to the BBC. Who was
Susan Spindler.
We sent it to Susan Spindler, that's right. And she was intrigued enough to call us in for a meeting, and we met with Susan and Tim Haynes, wasn't it? And they liked it. They thought there was a film there, and we hadn't started a company or anything. We didn't really know quite how we were going to make this happen. But they said, come into the BBC on a short contract, make this film for QED, and we'll take it from there. And that's what we did, and it was a hell of a learning curve. But we were lucky enough that they allowed Andrew to direct and me to produce, even though we hadn't really got a track record. They kept a close eye on us. They kind of had a few people man-marking us. But they let us get on with it. And we brought in a half-hour film.
We got more viewers for that show than any other show we've done.
Yeah, we did, because it's the only...
Downhill ever
it's
since.
Been downhill ever since. Have I got this right? Is it the only show we've ever had broadcast on BBC One?
Yeah.
Ever?
Yeah.
What's that all about? Yeah, I think it is.
And you did sound on that, didn't you?
I did the sound, which is and
I edited it.
the sound edited it,
So I had
and the
much
sound was
time.
awful. I mean, I remember there was a lot of opposition. Bruce wanted to build the world's biggest maggot. He had a dream, as you could see. There was a lot of local opposition, so there was all that not in my backyard story, and we went to film various meetings in village halls, and I stood in the corner of a village hall with a boom like that, assuming that I was picking up crystal clear sound from everybody speaking in the room. And it was just, some of it was used, you know. It somehow got through technical review. It wouldn't happen today.
Well, I'm going to move you on from the Maggot Farm now to two series of Cook on the Wild Side, which is where we saw you singing along to the radio in the Land Rover. And then came River Cottage. What was the genesis of River Cottage?
Well, River Cottage was a natural follow-on from Cook on the Wild Side. And Cook on the Wild Side was built around the idea of food for free. You know, I'd read Richard Mabey and was interested in food, in gathering mushrooms and that kind of thing. But I think what kind of held Cook on the Wild Side together was the Gastro Wagon, the convertible Land Rover. And that got us through first a Land Rover and then a barge, got us through a couple of series. And we then went into a rather serious head-scratching mode of what are we going to do next? And we were talking to Channel 4 about, should we go abroad? Should we do wild food? You know, we had this kind of, I was sort of shaping up as being the kind of hairy, not so hairy today, but the kind of hairy sort of roadkill, eat anything chef. Meanwhile, I was spending a bit of time in Dorset at a little cottage, and I literally one evening, time was coming to go back to London and try and get some work done. And one evening, I just thought, well, what if we stay here? What if all the things I'd quite like to do here, like grow some veg and have pigs, but as a kind of country weekender, part-timer, I don't have time to do. If I could stay here, we could do a bit of that. And that was just that sort of grow your own thing was just at the beginning of that kind of feeling. And we thought, well, we might get one little series out of that while we think about what we're really going to do next.
And Will, you talk about going in to see Ben Farrell, who was then the commissioning editor at Channel 4 after your first series.
Yeah, I was the researcher on the first series, and so I'd spent the whole summer down there meeting everybody who I could find to talk to in Dorset about food or food production. And came to that meeting at the end of the series and said, there's no more stories in Dorset. We filmed everything, and everyone who's interested, we should go somewhere else. And luckily, nobody took any notice of me at all.
So you were told that your attempt to cancel the entire franchise after one series was rejected.
I think we had a list of a few sequences that we'd thought about doing, but for one reason or another hadn't got round to. And then rolled them on to the next series and then just added to that list. And eventually we did pretty much pick every form of mainstream wild food that's vaguely worthwhile, kill just about every animal that you'd ever want to put in a pot and eat, and talk, and do most of the, once I'd done the chickens and the pigs, then I did the sheep, and after that, guess what? I got my own milking cow. And so that after 3 series, we really had kind of done everything. And then Ben just said, yeah, but it's so nice, why don't you just do it all again? So we sort of just changed locations and took some characters with us and just found slightly different ways of doing things. And of course, once people have a genuine affection for a location and for a group of characters, you can keep doing things with them, and they're happy to see the same faces appearing and a few new ones too.
Do you have a favourite River Cottage moment?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think I mentioned there that I'm quite competitive, and the first time I entered the Bedminster show, I won the Victoria Sandwich and came second in the Raspberry Jam. And that was definitely a real high point. And I think if you showed that clip, I'd be quite embarrassed about the unbelievable, unambiguous delight on my face at actually beating the WI at their own game.
You might say River Cottage is probably the least political programme it's possible to watch, but actually it has a sort of underpinning ideology, and then that ideology gradually and subsequently greatly came to the fore. So what was the moment when River Cottage stopped being all about sponge cakes and became more about changing the way that we live?
I think the underlying politics was there from the beginning, but it was never overt. And I think in River Cottage itself, it has rarely been overt. It's basically, I think in a way it was quite political to say, if we're going to cook pork, I'm going to show you the pig and then kill it, and then we're going to cook pork. That was the difference, I think. But it did I mean, things changed for us, I think, when Jamie Oliver did 15, it was clear that something that was very clearly campaigning and about real-world issues could actually sit in the kind of factual entertainment world. And that allowed us to do something that we've been itching to do, which was get properly political about things like, animal welfare, which was the obvious next step for Chicken Out, for the chicken.
Yes, and that began as a campaign against Tesco's, but then morphed into something.
Yeah, it went through. It was actually commissioned as an entirely different project.
Yeah, yeah. We were going to set up a sort of alternative to Tesco's, and we were going to take on a few issues of the supermarket issues, but we weren't getting any access at all, were we? So we decided we needed a single issue to have a go at them with. We then tried to get into our own, into sort of battery farms to sort of give us a sense of what was behind those doors, but we didn't get anywhere, so we thought, right, we're going to set up our own.
Well, you thought that. Andrew had this idea, and I remember that as a genuinely, one of those kind of sick feelings coming over me, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this. When Andrew and our producer, Jamie de Cruz, came to me and said, Hugh, we think the only way to take this project forward is if you start your own chicken farm. You've got to find a shed, you've got to set it up, and you've got to rear those chickens and take the viewer with you through that ridiculously short period, because it only takes 42 days to grow a chicken from a newly hatched day-old bird to something that's fat enough to sit on the shelves of Tesco. So that was the kind of storyline, the main storyline, and around that we then had local people starting their own chicken group and various other elements that came around it. But we had our own, Hugh's Chicken Run in the middle of it all.
Well, I want to come back at the end to how the campaigning side of what you do moved on from there. But at this point, when you were still making River Cottage, I was working in the Science and History department, and there's a kind of legendary group of people who would go off and make these films about various sort of individuals who lived in jungles and on the very kind of edge of disaster. And one of the companies that was making these films was you. And I can remember watching a film at that point about the search for the 30-foot long snake. This kind of impossibility. Apparently it's very, very easy to find a snake which is 29 feet and 7 inches long, but finding one that's 30 feet long is near impossible. So have a look at the next set of clips.
We have to guard all the exits, and then Sophie or you are going to catch it.
Okay. Well, let's hope Sophie's up to it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going in that trunk.
No,
that's a long and dark crawl.
To Twigger's relief, the Huaulu decide on a more cautious approach. After blocking up all the exits, they intend to get at the snake through a new hole cut into the top of the log.
It's going to come out crawling angrily, so it might be a problem to tie it up. And one thing, we left an island rope back in the base camp, so I think it was all our fault. Nobody thought about it. Especially your fault. You're the snake expert.
I told you to bring that blood clothes. Okay, don't kill it, guys, don't kill it.
And as we walked into the heart of the village, things got much worse.
John? What's all this about? Is it real, or is it just their way of saying hello? Hamish, this one, from back. Oh,
that was quite close.
After a while, I began to think that Akua was just having me on.
This one is quite good.
Too late.
Yes.
No, I think we may be waiting for some time.
Yes.
I'll try again a bit later.
But then he showed me how it was done.
Hey, go on. Good catch.
So,
how do you kill it? Do you break its neck?
Yes, I usually push the heart.
Push the heart? Jeez.
Yes.
Very efficient way of killing.
Akua didn't match his personal best of 900 orcs in 4 hours, but he certainly took back enough breakfast to last him for a while.
My brother Zand and I have come to the festival of Taipisam in Malaysia to conduct an experiment in pain control. We will both have metal skewers pushed through our cheeks and tongue. Zand is going first. If Zand has done everything that the Hindu priests have said he should, he will enter a blissful trance and feel no pain. I can't tell if he's in pain, but I don't like the way he's bringing his hands up, as if to stop the priest from piercing his tongue. His eyes are glazing over, but it's impossible to tell if this is a deep trance or complete agony. All I can think about is that it's about to happen to me.
So, Will, you were there on most of those shoots that we've seen. Starting off with the to the ends of the earth, big snake. Tell me about these expeditions and how they became films.
Well, Robert Twigger, who was the sort of slightly overweight white guy who you saw in that film, was had found out he was surfing he was a poet from Oxford, and he was surfing the internet. Penniless poet from Oxford, and was surfing the internet looking for poetry prizes which he could enter. And he hadn't found any poetry prizes, but had found that Teddy Roosevelt set up a prize for the Bronx Zoo in the 1920s, I think. Or even earlier.
Before the First War.
Offering, I think, probably only $5,000 back then to anyone who could bring along a live 30-foot snake to the zoo. And Twigger, with absolutely no snake hunting experience, thought that was something that he could have a go at, and investigated a bit further, and the prize was still there and is still unclaimed and had risen up to $50,000, I think.
Which is a lot more than any poetry prize he could find as well.
And so Andrew and I headed off to Malaysia and Indonesia for 4 or 5 weeks, I think, with an awful lot of 16mm film cans and equipment. We had about 30 porters with us, taking us into the jungle, and we basically just disappeared off the face of the earth for 4 weeks, with no satellite phones, no communications with the outside world, and wandered around.
More importantly, no food.
Yeah, no food. I'd forgotten to take any food, which sort of put us at the mercy of the people who we went to live with.
And there was a certain amount of kind of unrest in Indonesia at that time too, wasn't it?
There was a bit, we had, there was the Christians and the Muslims were kicking off, and it was slightly hairy whether we were ever going to get out, but because we were in the jungle, it all sort of passed us by a bit, in a way that I think probably couldn't and wouldn't happen anymore. But it was, looking back on it, it was a great experience to have had the chance to go and make films like that on 70 rolls of film, that you took everything with you. There was no chance of going back and picking up any, pickups or reshooting anything, or, it was a one-hit wonder, and we just went out and got on with it and came back with the film.
And they were easy to edit.
And
the ratios were 13-1 or something. Yeah.
And how long was the snake?
That snake that we caught was about 26 feet, we think.
So tiny.
But they would have paid us. We would have got a prize. We'd already got assurance from the zoo that if we got anything over, I think it was 23, wasn't it? That they would have given us a prize. But the tribe killed it and ate it.
So definitely for a time we had the longest snake in the world in our clutches. But I think it was quite a good ending, actually. We didn't really want to take it back to... We hadn't even thought about how we were going to get it back to the new...
It wasn't a great ending for the snake. I think we can safely say that.
And you've had a whole slew of other anthropology films as well. I mean, Nick Middleton, who we saw there, went to extremes, wettest, driest, highest, lowest, various other sort of geographical extremes of the planet, and also the amazing identical twin doctors who we saw getting their cheeks pierced. I still find that amazingly hard to watch. And then it culminated in restaging Scott's trip to the Antarctic with dog sleds in Greenland.
Yes, exactly. So Nick Middleton, I think we did 4 hours co-produced with the National Geographic, which again were all shot on film, and took us to really extremely remote places, which logistically were very hard to get to, and they're very expensive to get to too. So they were not easy shoots to do. But I directed my first film, which was the Swamp one, in Indonesia, and we carried on doing those for as long as we could.
We did three series, 3 seasons of 4 of each, didn't we? And it was hot, cold, wet and dry, and then it got slightly more spurious.
Yeah.
And ended up kind of somewhere in Mongolia at the end.
Yeah, that's right. It was the coldest region that's high and
Exactly.
the hottest region that's low. And you kind of did run out of extremes.
Yeah.
I suppose you could also say that one of the things that linked all these programs, brilliant as they were, was that they all tended to be white chap goes to faraway country and has adventure. That's a kind of TV program which you still see plenty of, and they can still be done tremendously well. But you kind of moved that genre on by turning anthropology on its head, flipping things around, and letting the people from faraway cultures have a look at us. So, do you want to say a little bit about
and
that?
have a voice, or shall we watch the clip
Yeah,
and then?
let's watch the clip.
Now we're on our way north to experience urban life on a housing estate in the city of Manchester. We're going to stay with an English working class family, and we're very much looking forward to sharing with them their ritual food,
KFC, fried chicken,
joining them at their custom dances, and experiencing their leisure activities.
This is what is known as a jet wash. Right, let's start that again.
They're keen that we look the part, so for one night only, we've agreed to step out of our Amish clothes and into British ones.
It's the first time I ever wore a pair of jeans, so it's something new.
Oh, Becky, that's good. Pink is so your colour. How pretty it is.
In the spirit of our last week, Becky and I have decided to embrace the challenge.
But it probably wouldn't hurt for once. Just to go with the girls.
For the first time in our lives, we're putting aside our plain ankle-length dresses.
Secretly putting the stripy dress on. It's so tight. It's like a uniform. You look so young.
And Becky's even going one stage further. Amish women keep their hair covered all day, every day. To wear it uncovered is considered dishonorable. But tonight, Becky's letting her hair down in public.
Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour.
After 20 minutes, Becky and I can bear no more, and our party splits, with Andrew providing our escort home.
It's a long, long way this faded road.
I felt quite scared actually, and I felt kind of vulnerable.
I detested having my hair down in a place like that. I mean, I never wore my hair down in public before, and I guess it's kind of special in a way. I mean, why did I take it down to go to a place like that?
rubber slippers, unburnt copper, aluminium, brass, zinc, battery, all this. This is what I buy. This is what I'm dealing on now. Our business is just like the stock market. The price of my business depends on dollar. When the dollar is down, the price goes down. When the dollar is up, the price goes up. The only difference between me and the people that works in the stock market is only the suit and the tie and the fine shoes.
Well, I'd like to talk about each one of these in turn. And I think it's true to say that a lot of people, when the idea of bringing people from Papua New Guinea and having them tour Britain, well, when a lot of people heard that, they thought it was a stupid idea. Initially, your plan was to bring 3 separate groups of people over.
Yeah, Simon had commissioned 3 different groups of people to come over. Well, you went to Ethiopia, didn't you, to look at possibilities there. I'd been looking at in the Congo. I think, and we had one crew that went out with our guys from Tana, and we felt really comfortable with the guys from Tana. They wanted to come. They had Prince Philip to come and have.
So just explain that. They because this tribe actually worshipped Prince Philip as a god.
Yeah.
Mildly illogical though that may seem to some.
Yes, indeed.
And how? Tell me how that is.
Well, nobody really knows, I think, is the truth. That story is lost in the mist of time. But he did sail past the island once in a big white boat, which the sort they had never seen before in the 70s. And it may be that and a mixture of the sort of mildly hallucinogenic kava that they drink every evening as the sun sets transpired to create this myth. But what we felt when we found them and went out there to talk to them was that, you know, there was a great danger with bringing people from another culture to the UK, that it would have been that we were just sort of laughing at them falling off escalators, or them not understanding the UK culture. It would be very easy to just point the finger at them and snigger. Whereas when we met the guys from Tana, we really felt that we were going to be facilitating something that they wanted to do anyway. They were motivated to come to the UK because they so desperately wanted to meet Prince Philip and give him this special message from the chiefs. So it can change the whole relationship with us and them. We became people who were helping them do something. But what that meant was that all the research that I'd done in Ethiopia and Andrew had done in the Congo kind of went out of the window because we couldn't find another group who were motivated to come here in the same way. So we went back to Channel 4 and said we want to just do it all about the Prince Philip guys. And that led to its own problems. Yeah.
Giving away 2 programs, quite difficult.
So Channel 4... and
Simon was very good. He said, OK, well, we'll go 2 hours
instead of 3.
So that made the pill a little easier to swallow. And then I think the moment we got the guys on the ground, we knew it was going to work. So we told Simon we were going to shoot for 3. So we had 3 different families to go to. And, in the end, it all worked out well.
And the multi-award-winning Meet the Natives was the result. The next one, which is bringing the Amish over, again I think demonstrates that kind of rather unfashionable TV commodity of sincerity, where the film is a very sincere attempt to kind of really understand how our lives look through the eyes of people who are profoundly religious and who have a completely different set of moral codes. Again, something which could quite easily have been quite dull. But wasn't. Tell me about that.
I think, well, again, I mean, we tapped into something that was very real, in that the Amish have a period called Rumspringa, where before they sort of join up to become Amish, they're allowed to go out into the sort of real world and sort of see if there's another way for them. So we were tapping into sort of groups of people who generally could and often would go out into the look at things the other side.
Yeah, they're sort of encouraged before the Amish take their vow and decide whether they're going to become Amish or not. They're encouraged to travel and they're encouraged to experience things of the outside world that they're then going to have to make a positive step to reject. So again, once we made inroads into them, we realised that they were motivated to come, and we weren't going to be in the same sort of. We were going to avoid all the pitfalls of just laughing at people who didn't know what was going on in the West.
And also applying what you guys had learnt from the experience of making Meet the Natives. I mean, it was clear that there was a way of doing things, that there was an opportunity, and that made a genuine impact, a genuine possibility of holding up a mirror to our own society and telling us quite a lot about them, but an awful lot about ourselves.
And I think that the nicest innovation in both of those things is the narration, because giving the narration to the people who you're making the film about, in both the natives and the Amish, was a really central way of getting into the heads of the as it were, your main contributors.
And after they'd been here for their kind of Amish gap year, did any of them decide to stay on, or did they all head straight back to Pennsylvania?
They all went back. I mean, there's very few people ever leave the Amish. It's an amazing fact.
I think it's a very comfortable place, sort of, as long as you can handle a little bit of stricture. Didn't you find?
Yeah, I rather fell in love with Amish country when I went out there. I got very into driving horses and buggies around and getting up early and working in the fields, which it feels very River Cottagey actually.
You actually gave up buttons for a while. Buttons are considered sinful.
Yeah. What do you mean for a while? Do you see any buttons there today?
I'm still Amish at heart now, yeah. But it's an amazingly comfortable place to live, I think, without any of the modern distractions or any of the modern stresses that all the Blackberries and phones and computers, they just, they're not there.
They have a different kind of Blackberry.
Exactly, yeah.
A better kind.
A better kind.
And then that brings us to this year's huge success, which is Welcome to Lagos, and there's a touch of the reverse anthropology about that as well.
Yeah, well, it sort of felt that once we'd done the reverse, the thing that we hadn't really done in anthropology was urban anthropology, and urban anthropology is being studied much more now amongst anthropologists and is becoming a much bigger thing. And the UN published a very important statistic which said that now over half the people on the planet are living in cities. We've sort of reached this irreversible tipping point where we have effectively become an urban species. So it felt like a very logical next step for us to go and see how people were living and adapting to life in cities. And obviously the place to do that is the place where most of the people who live in cities end up, which is in the slums of the developing world, which are growing faster than any other areas. So we chose Lagos because it's the fastest growing megacity in the world. It's got, I think, 10,000 people every week arrive in Lagos from the countryside. They're pouring in. And it's creating these very difficult living environments. But what we found when we went there was that actually people were thriving and being very innovative in the way that they were carving out lives for themselves and making money and surviving. Being in West Africa, it's a place of enormous energy. And possibly because life is so hard, people are very, very determined to succeed. And the characters were just there waiting for us to go and shoot.
And for a series set in one of the poorest places on earth, where human misery is everywhere, the overwhelming impression of that film is of immense charm. You I don't know if you want to live there, but you certainly want to go there after watching the film. Was that something that was hard to achieve, or took a lot of work to get?
No, not really. I mean, the characters, life in Lagos is lived at 150 miles an hour and at 150%, and the characters came towards us. They found us. The people who were sort of curious or interested in what we were doing, what these white guys were doing, standing in the middle of a rubbish dump day after day after day, they came and found us, and they are, in every sense, very, very larger than life. And what's so easy, I think, what we tried not to do when you're on a rubbish dump is you start seeing everything as if it's a sort of charity appeal or comic relief video with people who you should be feeling sorry for, but actually those guys didn't feel sorry for themselves, and they were, they are obviously just normal people who have all the same concerns as the rest of us, just maybe on a different scale. Which is why I think that the clip of Joseph talking about how there's no difference between him and a stockbroker, that's actually right. It's just they're just living in different environments.
Yeah. Well, the strand of Keo's filmmaking that we haven't touched on yet is kind of films about contemporary culture. And this year, there's been a big one. So time to watch another clip.
The film is the story of what happened when this guy tried to make a documentary about me, but he was actually a lot more interesting than I am. So now the film is kind of about him.
I don't know how the video camera came to my hand, but I know the moment it came inside my hand. I couldn't let it down, ever. He was like more than any drugs to anybody. He was obsession.
You can't do that here.
It's to take pictures.
You guys need to go.
But this is like Space Invader. You know Space Invader?
I know Space Invader, not here, no.
You don't know Space Invader?
Go!
Terry's cousin was Space Invader, a major player in an explosive new movement that would become known as street art. This hybrid form of graffiti was driven by a new generation using stickers, stencils, posters and sculptures to make their mark by any means necessary. With the arrival of the internet, these once temporary works could be shared by an audience of millions. Street art was poised to become the biggest counter-cultural movement since punk. And Terry had landed right in the middle of it.
Take two.
Go!
It was like a big adventure every night. We were going on top of building and going on top of something that was not just illegal, it was dangerous. You know, it was not like I'm downstairs and you upstairs doing your thing and I'm filming. No, I would go upstairs and I would go even up more to have the shot that is great.
I guess Terry showed up at a time when I realised that the reaction to this stuff was, you know, one of the most interesting things about it. Because for me, it's an important part of the job to run away as soon as we've done it. But at least with Terry, we had someone hanging around afterwards who could capture some of it.
You know Banksy?
Yeah.
You know Banksy?
I don't know. I mean,
he does very, very good graffiti.
Looks a bit like Banksy, but I know he's doing a bit more installations at the moment. And I like it.
What do you think of it?
Someone is annoyed with BT telephones.
So it all started with a late night thing called Shadow People. So Zam, give us a little bit of background about that.
Well, the Jamie De Cruz, who's a producer who works for us, has worked for us for ages, back in the late 90s, did a late night series for Channel 4 called Shadow People, about people who work at night in the sort of, you know, bodyguards and bouncers in nightclubs and prostitutes, and it involved him spending 3 months wandering around Soho in the middle of the night for a very long time and a very low budget. And one of the people he filmed was a graffiti artist who just arrived in London, who was Banksy. And 10 years later, Banksy came. Actually, there's a moment in the film where Banksy realises the lovely guy with the moustache is not making the street art documentary that he thinks he was going to make. And that was the point Banksy came to us and said, can you give us some help? And he approached Jamie, and Jamie set about looking at the 3,000 tapes, 3,500 tapes that Terry had shot over the last 7 or 8 years. And
none of which were labelled, and none of which were...
There's a marvellous scene where it becomes clear that the man doing the videoing isn't interested in what he's videoing. He's just doing it for some strange psychological kind of tick, and that he just throws all the tapes unmarked into boxes, occasionally attaching elastic bands around sort of 10 at a time. And we had to go through all of these, and we spent sort of 2.5 months, wasn't it, Andrew, going through tapes? I think.
How long was it in the edit? Over a year, wasn't it?
It was over a year in the edit, and eventually, out of this extraordinary amount of footage, where you'd be they were trying to identify, get some chronology going. So they'd Shepard Fairey's hair would be down here, And then the next tape, it would be kind of completely short, and then I'd say, oh, that was kind of...
Not unlike you.
Exactly. But yeah, eventually this rather sort of fantastic story about Terry came out of it.
I was fortunate enough to be at the very groovy Sundance Festival when it was premiered, and the audience at Sundance were genuinely bewildered by this film. They didn't quite know whether they were being inculcated into a fabulous art world that they wanted to be part of, or whether they were having the piss taken out of them, or quite what was happening to them. They're deeply confused and disoriented by the whole experience, in a way that was extremely entertaining to watch. And I mean, a lot of people say this film is not real; it's all made up. The whole thing is.
Yeah, I know you enjoy the whole idea that it is completely fake, but it's all completely. It is as you. It all happened as you see it in the film, and the sort of Terry was wandering around on the streets of La Brea or somewhere like that, selling second-hand clothes, obsessing over street art and obsessing over videoing and obsessing over Banksy, and eventually finds him.
Banksy, I believe, tagged the back door of the Egyptian theatre there in Park City during that premiere, and in good old American commercial style, the following day it was boarded up and removed brick by brick and carted off by the owners of the theatre and sold.
Yes. It is. I think his PR skills are quite epic. His promotional skills.
Is it hard to be a underground figure in the graffiti street art scene, and also have a film which is kind of quite high profile, gets marketed, and is a commercial success?
I think he finds it quite easy. I think the process of being anonymous is something that he's sort of developed to a fine key, and indeed his the very publicness of all of his art and the publicness of this movie now sort of somehow reinforce that in an entirely kind of appropriate way, I think. I never met him, for example, so he's very good at keeping himself anonymous.
And does he kind of communicate in code and come in at the dead of night?
I believe he communicates quite straightforwardly. Yeah.
That's not quite true. People who want to interview him have to send one question at a time, don't they?
Yes, I think that's right.
And
there haven't been many interviews.
And weren't you prevented from releasing any of the rushes of the film to other journalists who wanted to use them?
Of Shadow People, yeah, of the original. For a long time, that was the only footage of Banksy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That Jamie shot, 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we used to get rung up by the culture show and all sorts of people. Anyone who was doing anything on Banksy wanted that footage, and Jamie very sensibly never let them have it, and was rewarded by the delivery of all these tapes, I think, 10 years later.
So in 10 years he proved he was somebody who could do it.
After 10 years with Banksy, I think it takes a while, but after 10 years he's shown that...
There's a lovely moment in the film where, in fact, Banksy recognises the loyalty of Terry, and where he says at that point he totally... And it's when they do the Guantanamo Bay inflatable orange man inside Disney World. And basically, Terry gets nicked filming it. Banksy does make his escape, but Terry gets nicked. And Terry doesn't shop him. He doesn't rat him out. And from that point on, there is a bond there that you can see there's a trust. And that I think is the making of their relationship. And it's the pivotal point of the film in many ways.
Well, another change of gear, fortuitously for this event, on Monday, this coming Monday, your next film is going to be broadcast, and it's a film which, again, is a departure from some of the stuff that's gone before, making enormous waves and getting the glamorous cover of the Radio Times, which I greatly envy you for. And that is a film about Terry Pratchett and assisted suicide. So, one more clip. This is it.
Oh, good. All the best here. It's like being at the Ritz, isn't it? Right, can I just change what I say a little bit? Okay. My name is Terry Pratchett, and I write fantasy novels for a living. I am 62, and I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 3 years ago. Sometimes, particularly when I'm depressed, I dread what the future may hold. And it occurred to me that in these modern times, one shouldn't have to fear that sort of thing. I'm talking about assisted dying, which is currently not legal in this country. What you are about to watch may not be easy, but I believe it's important. The people I will meet in this film are all, like me, considering how they will die. Is it possible for someone like me, or like you, to arrange for themselves the death that they want?
Andrew, does this film advocate euthanasia?
No. I think it is probably pro-euthanasia, but it certainly doesn't advocate it. I mean, I think that it's a really, really powerful film, and you do see someone dying, and that's very, very, very visceral. But I think because Terry is sort of so grounded and vested in the subject, you feel that it is a completely legitimate journey for him to go on. And yeah, I think it's, in a strange way, it's slightly balanced. It's being shown here on Saturday, and I urge everyone to go and have a look at it.
And he follows actual friends of his.
They're not friends, but he just goes to visit people who are either considering it or...
Although actually by the time they die, they are friends.
Yes, that's true.
That's extraordinary. I mean, Terry forms an incredible bond with the two, particularly with pretty much everyone he meets. And because you're getting straight to a very important issue and talking about it very intimately and openly, and that does create a bond. But with the two people who do die in the course of the film, he is actually bizarrely quite intimate with them, but having only met them a couple of times or a few times before they die. And of course he's also fascinated by them because they're going through a decision-making process, and then they make that decision that he is now himself very seriously considering. So it's very extraordinary in that way.
Did you film the dying? The scene?
No, it was made by Charlie Russell, actually, the director. Yeah.
And there's been an enormous amount of controversy over this film, some of which is whipped up by the tabloids, some of which is probably real. Some people, I suppose, will find this quite an offensive thing to see on television. What's it been like handling the flack and the controversy?
Well, Craig's been handling it, who was the exec, but yeah, I mean, the Daily Mail have got upset, and...
Although, interestingly, I think all the comments below that online, or below the article, are very positive and pro, so I think the Daily Mail are having to kind of slightly test the water and see whether they've got their line right on it or not, whether they're actually reflecting their readers' views.
Yeah, the initial outrage in their online pages was entirely sort of negated by everybody's response, saying what a beautiful and sort of important film territory it was to kind of look at. And the guy who is who we follow to Dignitas is about as Middle England as you can get, isn't he? And that's what's so fascinating. It's a very good film.
And do you think Terry Pratchett himself is going to take that same journey in due course?
I think he really wishes he doesn't have to take that journey. But I'm...
Well, I think he wouldn't. He wishes he doesn't have to literally take the journey to Switzerland, because he wants the choice of doing that here in England. And that's effectively... I mean, I think it's appropriate to use the word campaign in this context, because I think it's fair to say that Terry is campaigning for people to be able to make this choice in the UK and not to have to make that journey to Switzerland. I think that's the direction this is heading in. And he makes, not particularly directly, but in the film, I think he makes the case for that very, very strongly.
Well, it's something that's really part of, or increasingly part of what you do as a company, which is advocacy and campaigning. And it brings us rather neatly onto, I think, your biggest campaign of all, which is Hugh's fish fight. And the final clip of today is this one that we're about to see.
Hundreds of boats around Europe are discarding fish every day, and no one really knows just how much fish is being wasted. But it could be close to 1 million tonnes a year in the North Sea alone.
Would it be possible, instead of sending this down the chute, to put some of it into these baskets? I'd just really like to have a look at the total amount of discard. Is that all right? We're taking all the discards off the conveyor belt to see what's left to keep. And it's a couple of little monkfish and a few megrims. Everything else is discard. Gary, this is all the discard, slightly less than all the discard actually, from one haul of the net. Have you ever seen it lumped together in a big mass of fish like that?
No, I haven't seen it before.
It looks like a good haul of fish to me, like.
You know what it reminds me of? It's like an old-fashioned picture of fish ready to go to market.
A lot of money's worth. A lot of money's worth.
Do you know how many baskets of fish we've got here, James?
We've got 20 baskets of fish.
So you're looking between 12 and 1,800 quid's worth.
So if you were doing a full trip, you could maybe multiply this discard by 30?
Yeah.
Yes, it could be between 25, 30, could be even 35,000 pounds on one trip. Over a sail.
Jesus.
20 quid for one fish. Go on.
You sound pretty angry, George.
I am angry about it because it's what I think about it, it's terrible. It's a damn disgrace. As I say, look at him. Look at this. Okay, we're getting small ones and all, but look. It's just to let everybody see what kind of stuff we're here. There's no way. And this is the worst of all. Look, beautiful whitings. A box of these would fetch about 70 to 80 pounds in the market. We can't even take them in. What a way. Just beautiful fish. This is beyond our control.
We don't have any choice about this, do we? There's no legal loophole that will allow us to save this fish.
No, I'm afraid not. They can only go one place from now, and that's back into the sea. Nice.
Same dish as I cooked for the guys last night with the fish we all just threw overboard, I could feed over 2,000 people.
Well, Hugh, you can't watch that without being really kind of shocked and horrified by the wastage of it all, the destruction. So for people here who don't know what the story behind that is, tell me, what is discard and the campaign against it?
Discards is what happens when a fishing boat runs out of quota, which they are handed by the EU. The EU says you are allowed to catch this many cod this year, or whatever. There are quite a number of species that have quotas on them. So they've caught as much cod as they're allowed, but they're fishing in a mixed fishery, and there are other fish that they're allowed to continue to catch, indeed that they need to catch to make a living. So they go on fishing for the other fish that they're allowed to catch, but every cod they catch, or whiting, if they've run out of whiting quota, is not allowed to be landed. So it has to go back into the sea dead, immediately after being caught. Now, we made our film about many aspects of the fisheries. We particularly looked at the three fish that we eat the most of, cod, tuna, and salmon. But it was on the afternoon that we filmed that particular sequence that I was confident that we had, A, a strong film, and B, the central proposition for a campaign. But that scene very nearly didn't happen, and it very nearly didn't happen because of me.
And it was thanks to Will that we shot. I mean the bit about making them put it in the baskets. We'd already filmed several hauls, endless amounts of discards just shooting out of the side of the boat. And Will had suggested that we do this thing for one haul where all the discards go in a basket and go up on the deck and we put them over the sides. And I was uneasy about that because it seemed to me that that's not what they do. That's not what the fishermen do usually. But it's precisely because it's not what they do usually that it was a really good idea to film it, because it elicited a completely different reaction from them. Because when they were down in the hold, gutting and cleaning the fish and letting all the discards fish just go straight up the conveyor belt, down the chute and into the sea, that was business as usual. But it was actually asking them to confront these baskets of prime fish on the deck and then tip them over the side that put them through an emotional reaction that changed the whole feeling of being with them, and you know, it tapped into their feeling of disgust and sort of an element of self-disgust as well, that they were involved in that process. And that was the moment when we thought, because you know, chicken welfare, which is our previous big campaign, it's pretty straightforward. If you take anyone into a battery farm and show them, or to an intensive broiler house, and show them how these birds are being reared, and most people are going to be pretty upset. And actually, a lot of people will say, I don't want to eat that kind of chicken anymore. But the whole fisheries business is so ridiculously complicated. I mean, I'm not even going to try and explain the EU fisheries policy here. It's so convoluted. But what we needed for our film and for our campaign was a central image of why it was wrong and what the problems were. And discards is that. The madness of discards, that millions of tons of perfectly good edible fish is being thrown away for essentially bureaucratic reasons. Everyone can relate to that. And that's why the campaign has been as effective as it has. And frankly, because of that, a lot of it down to that one scene that we shot. So thank you, Will.
And there's an interesting linkage, in a way, from where we started today, talking about the maggot farm, with this, because the maggots there are living on discards, effectively, from intensive battery chicken farming.
They absolutely are.
And it's all about kind of waste in our food production and destructive practices in farming, I suppose.
And it was absolutely the case that filming the maggot farm, Andrew and I spent a lot of time in the farm where there would be daily or twice weekly deliveries on a truck, a great dumper truck that would tip up this load of dead birds. Sometimes they were little, sometimes they were half-grown, and sometimes they were full-grown. And they were the result of smothers, which is a very regular occurrence in the intensive poultry industry, where either because of a heating failure or sometimes for no particularly good reason at all, the birds panic and they rush into a crowd, and a lot of them die, and maybe a third of might be 5,000-10,000 birds in a night die, and they have to be disposed of. And in that respect, the maggot farmer is the intensive poultry farmer's friend, because he's prepared to take the poultry off their hands and turn it into maggots. But we kind of stored that at the back of our minds. We knew there was something really unpleasant going on in the poultry industry, and that we always intended to come back to it. And we actually pitched the idea for Chicken Run several years and several times before we made it. And as I mentioned before, it was Jamie's success with 15 that allowed us to say, well, you know, look, we can take these things, and you know, it won't all be disgusting images of dead animals, I promise. Well, I'll do some cooking too. Oh, all right then, let's do it.
You know, you can watch TV and you can watch a television program and be appalled by what you see and then switch it off. But in a way, what's been so effective about Chicken Run and then subsequently Fish Fight is that they've really turned into campaigns that have got momentum and seem to be achieving some results.
Well, we decided in both cases, starting with Chicken Run, to offer the viewer the opportunity to do something about it. And in the case of Chicken Run, it was very simple. We just asked people to make a commitment not to buy that kind of chicken again, and to make that commitment clear online, and so that we were able to feed that back into the industry, into the supermarkets. And that has affected the industry, and it's affected the sales of higher welfare chicken, which have effectively tripled since the shows were made. That sounds like a grand statistic, but what it effectively means is that intensively farmed chicken has gone from being about 5 or 6% of the market for chicken in the UK to about 15 or 18%.
which is still means that over 80% of all the chicken that we consume is horribly intensively farmed, but it's still a difference. And now, of course, we're hoping to see some real change in the politics of how fisheries are run. And we're being heard in Brussels. We've had a debate in Westminster, which has condemned discards, and the British Fisheries Minister has made a commitment not to accept any reform of the CFP that doesn't deal with the discards issue. But it's very complicated, and only time will tell if we've made a real difference. We've made a lot of noise, and there is a lot of talk about this issue, but whether things will change significantly out at sea, and whether the stocks in the North Sea will see some recovery, it'll be years before we know that.
And it seems that the supermarkets are such a big part of controlling not only what the consumers buy, but also what the producers produce, that getting commitments from the supermarkets is often as big a way of changing the way that things work as getting some kind of political action is.
Absolutely. Well, we ruffled Tesco's feathers a lot with the chicken story. And I have to say, when it came to doing the fish fight, the supermarkets were a lot more, not necessarily happy to talk to us, but kind of realised that they pretty much had to talk to us. They didn't want to put themselves, it was very embarrassing for Tesco what happened when Chicken Out went out. And actually, it was pretty embarrassing for them what happened when Fish Fight went out. But in the Fish Fight follow-up, they've managed to redeem themselves a bit, I think. And that'll be showing in a few weeks' time.
And policy has changed, at least with regard to tuna, in terms of what a lot of the supermarkets are stocking and suppliers are bringing in.
Yeah, it has. Supermarkets have changed their labels. They've changed the way they're sourcing their tuna. They're going for pole and line tuna, which is a more sustainable way of fishing for it. And what we hope is that, it's already starting to happen a bit, but we hope that on a pretty impressive scale, lots of the the purse seining fleets, which have this big problem with bycatch of vulnerable species, will that some of those fisheries will move over, at least in part, to pole and line, and that will, again, we hope, have an effect out at sea, which means that fish that would otherwise be caught and killed and in some cases wasted will actually continue to swim out there and keep the oceans busy and fishy.
Yeah. Well, we've covered an enormous amount there. We have an opportunity now for some questions. But first of all, to Will, to Zam, to Andrew, and to Hugh, I'd just like to say thank you very much. Thank you. So I don't know if we can do something with the lights here so I can see through the murk. That's much better. I think we've got some microphones drifting around. So if anyone's got a question they'd like to ask, the gentleman here, just wait for a mic to get to you if you can, and also say who you are if you wouldn't mind.
Hi, Rob Nashcroft from the Kendal Mountain Film Festival. I'm just curious, Hugh, did you get your guddle in the end?
Only the oysters got guddled. I'm definitely clear on that one.
Could I just keep the mic while it's here? Another question for Hugh. Are we going to see a campaign soon for British dairy farmers?
I'm very aware of the problems with dairy farming and the welfare issues and the problems for farmers, the price of milk, and it's an incredibly industrially produced commodity now. And there's certainly a campaign in waiting there. I'm wary of moving on too quickly. I didn't want to actually do anything after chickens until I felt we'd done, made progress and got some measurable results. And we've got so much more that we like to do in the whole fish arena. I have to say, I've had a bit of I'm very exercised about the problems of marine conservation now, and I hope we're going to have some more opportunities to explore different aspects of that in the future and actually make some more films. So much as I feel for the British dairy farmer and feel for the British dairy cow, I'm probably not about to rush out and make that particular film.
Any other questions from the audience out there? There's one right up the back there.
Hi, my name is Shane Fennelly. I'm a documentary filmmaker from Manchester, living in Manchester. And I see you're all clearly into anthropological film, and I myself am also very into anthropological film. And I see Hugh, like you do the kind of activist stuff as well with the fish, and I really enjoy that. And I'm just thinking if you guys have any idea of, in terms of style or content, how anthropological film is going to progress over the next few years, or even how the People's Republic of Kino is going to progress.
Andrew, where's anthropological filmmaking heading?
I don't know. There was something really interesting in the Lagos shoots, which we had sort of crews out there, but we also deposited cameras in various places. So in the first film there was a sort of scene in which the dump gets on fire. And Eric, our main protagonist, films this, and he does an absolutely brilliant job. And it just, I think it's part of it, that the way we film things, the way we can sort of access that sort of, those sort of sequences without having crews there, it feels as though that's very exciting. Well, what do you think, Will?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how it would have been impossible to make Lagos, or Lagos would have looked very different if we'd shot it in the old-fashioned way on 16mm. And part of the energy of it is having small cameras and being able to just jump and respond to things quickly and throw them around. And as Andrew says, handing out cameras to people in remote places. I know Kevin McDonald's just done Life in a Day, where he handed cameras out to people all over the world, some of which in very remote parts of the world. And what you come back with is very, very intimate footage, because people use them as video diary cameras or as confessionals almost. And I think that has an immediacy that's very hard to get otherwise. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
You're an editor by trade, and I sometimes feel that the particular skills that bringing in a huge amount of material and then editing it together is, some of your films most definitely are made in the edit rather than made on the road.
Yeah, I think the amazing availability of cameras, the amazing cheapness of film stock and tape stock, and indeed digital cards now, are going to mean people spend a hell of a lot of time in the edit. Really, I mean, I don't know how long a Life in a Day took to post-produce and stuff. But
you're absolutely right about the edit, because on almost all the projects we've seen tonight, clips from, the possible exception of River Cottage, actually, there have been weeks, if not months, of Andrew with his head in his hands. I mean, how are we going to turn this into a film? And there's usually a breakthrough moment that comes, or an interesting decision that's made that sort of swings it for the film. And there's always a film. It is quite like sculpture, isn't it? It's like a big block of wood, and you're chipping away, and something emerges from it.
Yeah, something like that, I think. Andrew's always quite good fun. Because I'm an editor, I always sort of stick around in London as the other guys go off around the world, and it's always really good fun getting Andrew's phone call on about day 5, and it's a catalogue of sets. You just got to ring up Simon, Hamish, Charles, and tell them I don't think we've really got a film here at all. I think maybe a half hour if we're lucky. All right, okay. That was the first, when we were in Going to Extremes Cold. It was and that, it did take a while.
A lot of snow. Yeah,
a lot of snow, and quite an unwilling protagonist.
Well, our problem in that turned out to be our solution, didn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. Turning Nick Middleton, the middle-aged, mid-latitude, middle-class geographer, into a kind of unwelcome tourist. We thought he was going to be like Bear Grylls, or who was the other bloke? Mr. Myers. Ray Mears, sorry, who quickly chops a dining room table out of sort of trees and sits down to eat roast chicken. And we thought there was going to be a lot of butch action, and Nick Middleton just hated it. He hated going to the loo in an outside loo at minus 45 degrees, which I can sympathise with. He hated the lovely bits of raw horse liver that he was offered as a special delicacy to ensure his vitamin levels stayed high. And it took us a while to realise that was the point of it, but we got there in the end.
Any other questions to ask from out there? And yes, I see a hand there.
I speak not as a multi-platform person really at all, but I noticed at Keo Films you've had such a strong web presence, both in your campaigns, and it seems to be so integrated with your company policy. I was wondering how that, I know it came through Chicken Run campaign, but is there one person in the team who really was for web integration, or did it just sort of evolve?
I think it's a sort of gradual feeling that the web and telly work together so well. Chicken Out showed us we got 180,000 people signed up to our campaign on the Chicken Out website, and we didn't really do anything. We just stuck a page up and sort of mentioned it in the programme, and 180,000 people signed up. And then when we were doing the special resolution against Tesco's, or trying to get into the Tesco's, Hugh bought a share and issued and tried to change the way Tesco's bought their chicken. And Tesco's then got a little bit nervous about us, and so changed it into a special resolution and told us that we had to distribute the sort of paperwork to all the shareholders of Tesco's because we'd missed a deadline, and that was going to cost us 90,000 quid. Amazingly, Channel 4 didn't pop up, completely stump that up, but we then went back to the 180,000 people who'd signed up and said, listen, we've got to get this resolution in, and Tesco's are charging us 90,000 quid to post it out, or else we're going to miss the annual general meeting. And we raised, I think we got 90 grand in under 12 hours.
And the other thing about that, of course,
was the point at which we realised telly and the web can be amazingly powerful.
But the main thing the really exciting thing about that was it gave us content, because that was actually the subject of the website and the website became the subject of the follow-up show. And we've been doing the same now with Fish Fight. So that's the strength of the interaction, as your campaign becomes your story, and it gives you. And even we managed to launch the campaign, the Fish Fight campaign, while we were still filming the series. So we were able to film us launching the campaign and then feed that back in, which was really useful. I mean, that gave us a fantastic snowball effect. So people felt they were joining something which they'd already seen starting to happen in the films. And we've got actually key members of our digital team sitting here in the theatre. And it's been a brilliant synergy between the different parts of the company, all working together and all enjoying the fact that we're kind of feeding off each other, and it's very exciting.
The only slightly annoying thing is that once you've got 180,000 people signed up to your Chicken Out campaign, or 730,000, or however many hundreds of thousands of people we got signed up to the Discards campaign, you can't ask them to give you a quid. It's just got to go to the good campaigns. So for the company to make money out of it, for the company to monetize the web we aren't absolutely completely there yet, I wouldn't say.
We're not trying to make money out of campaigns, are we, Sam?
Of course we are. Of course we are. But, with a commercial head on.
No sweatshop.
Exactly.
Good. Well, anyway, do we have another question from the floor? Yes, down the front here.
Just a brief question on where the fish campaign goes. Something that I think Will said this morning was a key thing is getting EU politicians to think that it makes a difference to them being elected. Are you able to take it a next step before the next EU election, or what is the thing about that? Can you not get anywhere near that?
No, we're firmly into the whole European network now, and actually what we've done is we've made an hour-long version of the film, which we're doing as a multilingual version, and we're offering that up to various broadcasters, and we'll see where we get with that. But if we don't get an actual transmission from a European broadcaster, we will make sure that it's viewable on the internet. And and we've been in Brussels quite a lot, and we've got a follow-up show coming which tells part of the story of that, and it's more of that web content, providing content for the shows. But actually, it's perfect timing, by luck rather than judgment, but it's perfect timing for the campaign because the CFP is up for wholesale reform. That process had already begun before we made the film, but we were able to get the film in the mix and into the consciousness of European politicians and the Fisheries Commissioner at a critical time. And actually Maria Damanaki, who is the Fisheries Commissioner, has become a supporter of the campaign because it's actually helping her do what she wants. but not necessarily all the European countries want, which is to actually legislate against discards in the reformed CFP.
And what's quite interesting is that we're now getting money from other philanthropic organisations who are involved in environmental concerns, or particularly marine concerns, and so they're approaching us and giving us money to expand the campaign beyond the reach of what we initially thought, which was just the 4 hours on Channel 4. So it'll now run for another 18 months until the CFP is reformed in the end of 2012.
Well, I think we probably have time for one final question, if anyone feels in the mood to ask it. And if not, then I will just thank everybody for coming. And I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. And see you next year for the next one. Thank you very much.